What is the salary cap sweet spot? What is the salary cap? In 2005, the NHL locked out for a full season due to a strike. Billions of dollars were lost by the league, and one of the measures introduced in 2006 was the salary cap. Set in US dollars, this hard cap was effectively designed, unofficially, to prevent Canadian teams from having deep runs into the playoffs, or even making it for that matter. But maybe I'm paranoid. It did help ensure, however, that teams in weakly supported US markets would have the cream of the crop of talent, the most exciting product to draw in fans, and the most playoff success to keep the game growing. This is a long, drawn-out subject, but for this video, I am going to stay focused on the cap hits of the two teams to make the Stanley Cup Finals in each of the last 7 years. Back in the 2017-2018 season, with the salary cap set at $75 million, we saw Alexander Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals defeat the Vegas Golden Knights, finally seeing Ovi win a Stanley Cup. Taking a look at the cap hits of the last two teams standing that year, Washington, Alexander Ovechkin at $9,538,000. Kuznetsov, $7,800,000. Nicholas Backstrom, $6,700,000. Braden Holtby at $6,100,000. Following that, in the middle, they had players between $5 and $6 million named as Matt Niskanen, TJ Oshie, Brooks Orpik, Dmitry Orlov. That's a solid roster for a very low price. On the losing side of that, we had Las Vegas in their inaugural season, making the Stanley Cup Finals, and they had Andre Fleury, $5,750,000, Thomas Tatar, $5,300,000, and both at $5 million, James Neal and Riley Smith. All active players after that were under $4 million, mostly under $3 million and lower, actually. The 2018-2019 season saw the salary cap increase to $79.5 million. That season, we saw the St. Louis Blues defeat the Boston Bruins to win their very first Stanley Cup ever. Here's a look at the top cap hits from the last two standing that year. St. Louis had Vladimir Tarasenko at $7.5 million, Ryan O'Reilly at $7.5 million, Alex Pietrangelo at $6.5 million, Alexander Steen at $5.75 million. Following that, they had these players at $5 million or just around that: Colton Perrienko, Jay Bouwmeester, Jaden Schwartz, Braden Shen, and face-off master Tyler Bozak. On the losing side of that, we had Boston Bruins with David Krejci at $7.25 million, Tuukka Rask at $7 million, Patrice Bergeron, $6.875 million, Brad Marchand, $6.125 million. Following that, they had these players between $4.5 and $6 million: David Backes, Torrey Krug, Zdeno Chara, and Marcus Johansson. Solid D, solid depth, cheap. In the 2019-2020 season, we had the COVID-19 lockdowns and playoffs were held entirely in Canada. Tampa Bay won the Cup for the first time since 2004, defeating the Dallas Stars. This is how the cap hits looked for the last two that year. Tampa Bay had Nikita Kucherov at $9.5 million, Steven Stamkos at $8.5 million, Victor Hedman at $7.875, Ryan McDonough at $6.75, Braden Point at $6.75. The following players made between $3.5 and $5.3 million: Andrei Vasilevsky, Alexander Killorn, Tyler Johnson, Yanni Gourde, Ondrej Palat. Absolutely killer. Very good prices. On the losing side of that, we had the Dallas Stars with Tyler Seguin at $9.85, Jamie Benn at $9.5, Joe Pavelski at $7, Alexander Radulov at $6.25, with the following players in the middle making between $3.25 and $5.8 million. In the 2020-21 season, we saw the NHL bunch the Canadian teams together in one division for the only time in history. This was due to cross-border travel restrictions made in Canada. The Tampa Bay Lightning were once again victorious, this time taking out the Montreal Canadiens. A rare deep run for a Canadian team. This also marked the first time in history that a team has made the finals with a player making over $9.85 million. That was Carey Price, and he is the reason the Montreal Canadiens surprised so many people. This is how the cap hits looked for the last two teams that year. For the Tampa Bay Lightning, Andrei Vasilevsky with $9.5 million. That makes a $6 million raise, but keep in mind, he did win the Stanley Cup the previous year. Following that, Victor Hedman at $7.875, Ryan McDonough at $6.75, Braden Point at $6.75, and Palat with $5.3 million. Following that, these players made between $2.95 and $5.166 million. Also, very controversially, this is what they hit in the long-term injured reserve list. Nikita Kucherov with a $9.5 million salary. Steven Stamkos with an $8.5 million salary. As well, Marian Gaborik and Anders Nilsson. For the Montreal Canadiens, Carey Price at $10.5 million, making him at that time the highest paid player ever to make the Stanley Cup Finals. Following that, Shea Weber at $7.857, Josh Anderson at $5.5, Jeff Petrie at $5.5, and Jonathan Drouin at $5.5. So that's not too bad considering. Following that, between $3.5 and $5.5 million, they still had Thomas Tatar, Jake Allen, Tyler Toffoli, and then Joel Edmondson and Ben Sherratt for a scrap. On the long-term injured reserve, Montreal had Brendan Gallagher at $3.75 million. However, I have not confirmed whether he returned before the end of the season. But anyway, who fucking cares? Tampa just had Kucherov and Stamkos on reserve for the Stanley Cup win. In the 2021-22 season, the Colorado Avalanche beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, who were in pursuit of a three-peat. Imagine that if they won 3 in a row in Florida and then Florida wins. The Colorado Avalanche had Mikko Rantanen at $9.25 million, Cale Makar at $9 million, Gabriel Landeskog at $7, and Nathan MacKinnon at $6.3 million in the prime of his career. Following that, between $4.1 and $6 million, they had Eric Johnson, Samuel Girard, Andrei Burakovsky, Nazem Kadri, and Devon Taves. On the other side of that, the losing team this time, Tampa Bay Lightning, had pretty much the same salary cap hits and lineup, except for the fact that Steven Stamkos and Nikita Kucherov were not held on long-term injured reserve. That brings us next to the 2022-23 playoffs, where the Vegas Golden Knights defeat the Florida Panthers. This marks the first time in history that a team with even one player making over $9.538 million has won a cup. Where the heck did Vegas come from, though? I mean, they joined the league a few years ago, their second time in the finals, and now they're hoisting Stanley. Vegas Golden Knights, with Jack Eichel making $10 million, Alex Pietrangelo, 8.8, William Karlsson, 5.9, Alex Martinez, 5.25, and Shea Theodore at 5.2. Following that, between $2.75 million and $5 million, they had Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault, Nicholas Raw, Braden McNabb, Chandler Stevenson, and Zach Whitecloud. On the losing side, we had the Florida Panthers with Sergei Bobrovsky, $10 million, Alexander Barkov, $10 million, Matthew Tkachuk, $9.5 million, Aaron Ekblad at $7.5, and Sam Reinhart at $6.5. Now in Florida following that, in the middle between $2.5 and $4.16 million, they had Carter Verhaeghe, Brandon Montour, Anthony Duclair, Gustav Forsling, and Radko Gudas for some goonage. Well, finally, that brings us to the 2023-2024 season, in which we saw the Florida Panthers defeat the Edmonton Oilers for their very first Stanley Cup win. Legend has it in Canada that outside of the immediate vicinity of these games, locals didn't even know hockey existed. Cap set at $83.5 million that year. Here's how the last two teams moved the money. Florida, same core as before, plus between $2.5 and $4.425 million they had Sam Bennett, Carter Verhaeghe, Brandon Montour, Evan Rodriguez, Gustav Forsling, and among a list of $2.5 million cap hits, Vladimir Tarasenko. Vladimir Tarasenko for $2.5. Is Gary Bettman making these deals for them? Now, on the losing side, we had the Edmonton Oilers with Connor McDavid making $12.5 million a year. Incidentally, he is now the highest paid player ever to make the Stanley Cup Finals. Moving on, we have Darnell Nurse at $9.25 million, Leon Draisaitl at $8.5, Matthias Ekholm, 6.25, and Zach Hyman at quite a steal for $5.5 million. Nonetheless, following that, between $2.75 and $5.1 million, the Edmonton Oilers have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Evander Kane, Evan Bouchard, Cody Ceci, and Warren Foegele. So having analyzed the last two teams standing in each of the last 7 Stanley Cup Finals, I believe I can see a pattern. Can you see a pattern? The highest paid player ever to win a Stanley Cup made no more than $10 million a year. These teams, however, with lower core player costs, did not have lesser players. Quite the opposite. They had superstars with the grit and character to lead a better team. By overpaying star players before they have had any playoff success, it breeds a culture of entitlement and division in these organizations and inevitably diminishes their depth. Could this be the year we see a top-heavy team go deep? Maybe, but it seems unlikely given the data. Having said all that, thanks for watching, and please subscribe to this channel for the follow-up in which I will take a look at which contending teams are in the salary cap sweet spot this season.